not here today. He's out of town. Yeah, it's not that anymore. Okay, we are, wow, that's plenty powerful. We are in on lesson 2 today. We're going to be looking at Hosea. We're studying the minor prophets, and it is somewhat of a different kind of study. It's probably one of those parts of the Bible that most of us are not greatly familiar with, and it's interesting to me, but it's hard. It's a hard kind of study for me, especially if you don't have some help. And I like to find out when the prophets were. One thing that I learned a long, long time ago about the Bible is that it's not necessarily written in chronological order, especially this part of it. I don't really know how the order was determined, but but it's not written in chronological order. Of course, you see that as well. Like you have 1st and 2nd Kings and Samuel as well, and they're kind of in chronological order. But then when you get through reading that, you go to Chronicles, and it goes back and starts again, telling some of the same stories. And in books like Nehemiah and Ezekiel and Ezra, they are the character. They're just. It's hard to know exactly where all that belongs. But actually, we had a lesson on Hosea in last quarter, if you remember. In the families, and I don't think Penny and I were here that Sunday, but wasn't there a lesson in the book about Hosea and Gomer? Yeah, so I mentioned that to Jay, but I'm sure that it focused on things that are, of course, we're reading, our text is from Hosea 11 this morning. But before we even get into the text, let's just kind of lay the historical background or talk about where we are in history and where we are as far as the nations of Israel and Judah are in history. First of all, let me say that Hosea, last week we studied Amos, right? Well, Hosea is a contemporary of Amos. They both were prophets during a relatively same time period. So if you remember last Sunday in the lesson when we were talking about the time period, Jeroboam number 2, because the first king of Israel was named Jeroboam, but this is Jeroboam 2, who is the king. It's way hundreds of years later, and we're not but about 40 years or so, somewhere in that time frame, from the Assyrians coming in and taking the north captive completely. So I can tell you that happened in 722 BC. So we are somewhere in the mid 700s BC, 750 or so, before Christ in our lesson last Sunday and in our lesson today as well. Quickly to rehash the story of Hosea, what's so unique about the actual story? Not God's prophecy through him, but what's so unique about the story of Hosea? What did God tell him to do? Go marry a prostitute. Yes. And Hosea obeyed. And 3 children were born to that, and they had the weirdest names. And all of them were named what they were named for a specific reason. The first one was a son. His name was Jezreel. Now, Jezreel had to do with a man by the name, that was a city, a town as well, an area, and it had to do with a man by the name of Jehu, who committed some horrible things in Israel, and God said at that time that I'm going to make the household of Jehu pay for that. And so actually when God tells Hosea to name his first son Jezreel, it's because God is fixing to take vengeance on the household of Jehu, who had committed a crime against the city and the people of Jezreel. But then the next two sons, the next two children, one of them is a daughter and one of them is a son. Let me see. In the ESV, it doesn't use the Hebrew name. And so the daughter's name, born second, was No Mercy, or Lo Ami, A-M-M-I, which meant no mercy. And that is God sending a message through these children that I'm not going to be showing any mercy to Israel because of their sin. The second son and the third child, when he was born, his name was Not My People, which is in Hebrew was, Lo Ami is no mercy. Lo Rahuma was no mercy. And Lo Ami is not my people. And what God is saying, there's kind of two things that could be. One is God is saying, this people is not my people because they've rejected me and they've turned to idols and they're no longer serving me. The other idea, though, with not my people is when God talks about my people will become a people. My people, there are people who are not my people who will become my people. And who was God talking about when he said that? Who in the Old Testament were not God's people but one day would become God's people? The Gentiles, exactly. And so there's a way that it could be used that way as well. But these names and these children and this family are representative of God's relationship with Israel, which in the book of Hosea especially, a lot of times Israel is referred to by the name of Ephraim. And who was Ephraim? Ephraim is actually a tribe. He's a half-tribe. What does that tell you? They were Joseph's sons. Manasseh and Ephraim were Joseph's sons. There was not a tribe that went by the name of Joseph. There were two half-tribes. And one of them was Manasseh, Joseph's son. The other one was Ephraim, Joseph's son. And so Ephraim was a tribe that lived in the land of Israel, and they were representative of the rest of the Israelites in that land. And so when you read the word Ephraim in Hosea or a lot of other Old Testament books, it's making reference to the people who would have been a part of the nation of Israel. Okay? So, well, what is the story about in Hosea, about Hosea marrying this prostitute? Why in the world did God tell him to do that?
Because Israel had strayed. They had prostituted themselves. So he was using Hosea as a literal comparison.
Yes.
That they could see, the people could see physically what was going on, and then he could relate that to what they were doing spiritually.
Exactly, Jody. And how did Hosea feel about Gomer? Do you know? I think it's fair to say he loved her. He loved her. He did his best. In fact, in chapter 1, God says to Hosea, go marry a woman of whoredom, of prostitution. Yes. Go marry a woman. And he does. And 3 children are born. Then you know what happens? Gomer leaves him. Yes, she leaves Hosea and she begins to live a life of prostitution again. She lives with a man that she's not married to. Okay? And so God, in chapter 3 of Hosea, talks to Hosea again and says, Hosea, you go find her. And in a way, you redeem her. You buy her back. And I thought, this is almost funny to me. You want to know what a woman cost? And back in those days? Let me see if I can find that. Here we go. So I bought her, this is verse 2 of chapter 3, Hosea speaking. I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a lethek, or lethek of barley. And that lethek is a measurement that I'd never heard of before. So it cost him 15 shekels of silver and a pretty good sized pile of barley. And he bought Gomer back. And when he did, he said this to it. And I said to her, you must dwell as mine for many days. You shall not play the whore or belong to another man. So will I also be to you. For the children of Israel shall dwell many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or pillar, without ephod or household gods. And afterwards the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord their God. So Hosea just kind of in a few words lays out how his relationship with Gomer is like the people of Israel's with God. They are united. God has chosen the Israelites to be His people, and He loves them and He cares for them. But they are not faithful to Him. They are unfaithful in that relationship. They are guilty in the book of Hosea of harlotry, of being prostitutes, because they have gone and worshiped other gods and joined themselves to the people who worship other gods. And God, you know, the Bible tells us in the Old Testament something, we usually think of it as not a very good word. But the Bible says that God is a jealous God. Now, what does that mean to you? Do you usually think of jealousy as a good trait? Not usually. But it has its place. It really does. If I go to paying a lot of attention to another woman, you think my wife has a right to be upset about that? I think she does too. It's all right for her to be jealous. It might be appropriate, you know. I need to take notice of that. That would be wrong. That's God's jealousy. God has chosen a people to be His people, and then they've got idols in their houses from the pagan gods in the land that were in the land that they live, and they've got them setting up in their houses. And they pray to God. They still have the worship that goes on in worshiping God, but they also do that for their pagan gods as well. Now, you think God's wrong to be jealous about that? No, He wasn't.
Yeah, we talk about Him, though, and how He obeys God. I can't help but wonder, how did she feel? How she would think, why would God want me? You know,
Right.
we don't talk much about her.
Because we're not ever told what her... We're told what she does, but we're never told what she thinks about this. Yeah.
But I wonder about that.
Yeah, that is fascinating, Debbie. It's like, you know, what is gone? But here's probably the sad truth. If the comparison continues. We see it with Hosea being as God who loves this people who are not faithful to him. Then the truth of the matter is, obviously, Gomer's not very faithful to Hosea either. That's what makes the story representative. That's right. That's right.
That does tell us that part.
Right. As opposed, and you think, well, what's he doing marrying a woman like that? Well, you know what? Here's you another Bible story to consider. Rahab the harlot. And Rahab ends up marrying very well. And becomes, somebody help me, becomes Boaz's mother. Is it his mother? It's his mother or his grandmother. You're right. I'm supposed to know. But, huh? I don't know. Is she either married Obed or she was the mother of Obed? It's one or the other, Dodie, I think. And I did know, not too long ago, but I forget. Okay, so we've kind of laid out the physical story that's going on with Hosea, Gomer, and the family in the book of Hosea. But there's a whole lot more to Hosea than just that story. That story is basically told some in chapter 1 and some more in chapter 3. And other than that, we don't get much about the story of Hosea and Gomer, except we do see and understand how it relates to God's relationship with Israel. So today in our lesson, in chapter 11, this is just God speaking through Hosea the prophet and saying some things about and to the people of Israel. But maybe even before we look at that, I just jotted down a few other verses that I wanted to read from Hosea. And some of these might be even a little bit familiar to you. I bet you've heard this first one. Here is Hosea chapter 4, and I'm going to read verse 6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I reject you from being a priest to me. And since you have forgotten the law of your God, I also will forget your children. You ever heard the first part of that verse especially? My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. I've seen that several times and heard that quite a bit. That is from the book of Hosea. And it comes in one of these chapters where God, through Hosea, is bringing accusation against the people. And God's message to them is, you've rejected the knowledge of God. And you've gone to the idol worship. And because you have forgotten about me, I'm going to forget about your children. In other words, when Hosea is writing this, most of the adults are not going to be alive anymore when the Assyrians come, but their children are going to be there, living in the land 40 years later. And when the Assyrians come, they're going to take them away. And they're never going to come back. They're not coming back. Israel's going to be gone. Here's another verse. This is chapter 4, verses 10 through 12. And I picked this out because it uses some of the language that we've been using. They shall eat but not be satisfied. They shall play the whore but not multiply. Because they have forsaken the Lord to cherish whoredom, wine, and new wine, which take away the understanding. Here's what I want you to understand. That ugly word, whoredom, is not really talking about necessarily the sexual relationships that are going on between the people. It's about the spiritual relationship that the people have with God. They are forsaking their God and worshiping handmade idols. And God calls it being a whore, being a harlot, committing adultery is what he's calling it. My people, listen, my people inquire of a piece of wood. What's he saying?
They're worshiping the
They're worshiping, they're talking to an idol as if it's got some kind of power, as if it can answer him. And their walking staff gives them oracles. For a spirit of whoredom has led them astray, and they have left their God to play the whore. Ugly language. But that's the way God through Hosea describes what these people are doing. Now then, one more time. Chapter 6 and verse 4 beginning, I'm going to read about 3 verses. What shall I do with you, O Ephraim? There's Ephraim means the people of Israel. What shall I do with you, O Judah? There's another thing, that point that's made in Hosea and other prophets. There's even controversy about the last part of chapter 11, whether it's how you translate it. But Judah is much better, really, right at this period. Judah is better, a more faithful nation than Israel is, but don't think they don't have their problems. And oftentimes it's based upon, what determines how things are going in Judah, some of you? Exactly, Dodie. Who's the king? Because men like Asa and Hezekiah, they are faithful to God. And when those kings are really trying to be loyal to God, you know what they do? They send people out there and they tear down those places where the people are worshiping idols. And they put them in piles and burn them. And they warn the people, you've got to stop doing this. But then, you know, they don't have but 1 or 2 good kings in a row. And then along comes a king that's not that way. And the people slip and slide right back into that idolatry. And so don't think for a moment that Judah down here is all good, because they're better and they have their good times. But I said in 722 is when the northern kingdom gets carried away into Babylonian captivity. Well, somebody might have to help me. It's 573, basically 125 to 150 years later. Guess what happens to Judah? Babylonian captivity. So they're only 150 or so years behind not as bad. And what about Judah? Is Judah going to be wiped off the face of the earth? They're coming back, because God, through the prophet Isaiah and others, says 70 years. I'm going to let them be gone 70 years. And that's hard, kind of, some were more than 70 and all, but that's pretty much time. And King Cyrus, who's going to be the Persian king, he's going to release them. And that's where we get into the book of Nehemiah and the book of Ezra and the people coming back from Judah. So I want us to know, to be able to understand, there's 2 nations here who are Jewish people, Israel and Judah. Israel being called Ephraim in Hosea. And Israel is quite a bit worse than Judah, but it's not like Judah's really doing well either. And there, that passage says it. What? Not a one, Dodie. And thank you. That's a great point. Because Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, becomes the first king of Israel. Y'all know that story, because that's when Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, becomes king. And you remember how he said he's going to attack some more, and the nation divides. And Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, becomes the king over Israel, whereas Rehoboam continues to be the king over Judah. And from that point on, every king of Israel in the Bible, it's something is said about them. That this king did not serve the Lord, but turned the people away to idols, following the footsteps or the example of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. Why did Jeroboam allow the people to go to idolatry?
He didn't want them going to Jerusalem to worship.
That's right, he didn't want to lose them. They had a new nation. He's the king of them. He doesn't want them going back to Jerusalem and having a relationship with that God again. So He builds places for them to worship down there. Of course, that was wrong within itself, because Jerusalem's Jerusalem. There's not but one, and that's where they're supposed to go. But He allowed the people, led them into idolatry. And you're exactly right, Dodie. They never had a king who was faithful to God. Now, a few of them, a few times, humbled themselves, and God spared them a few things, but none of them could ever be said they were loyal or faithful to God. Not a single one. Read 2 more verses. Therefore I have hewn them by the prophets, I have slain them by the words of my mouth, and my judgment goes forth as the light. For I desire, here's why I chose this verse. This is one of those beautiful verses in the Old Testament that tell us about who God is and what He really wants. For I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. You think the people in Israel didn't know how to go down to their places of worship and offer those sacrifices on the idols? They did it all the time. And then they went home and worshiped the idols that were in their home. And God was being a halfway devoted follower of God is not getting anybody anywhere anytime. You understand? Including today. What is that? What is an application of that today? If I'm a Christian, but I love the world, that's what I spend all my time doing, what would you be able to say about me? That's right. And you know what that would mean? I'm guilty of whoredom. I'm guilty of spiritual adultery. I might show up every Sunday. Y'all don't know what I do the rest of the week, though. I'm all about everything else in the world that God knows. Absolutely. But God knows. Okay. Let's get to our text, which is kind of difficult if you ask me, but we'll look at it. It starts out, obviously, God is speaking through Hosea. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. You know what that story is, right? We know all that story about children of Israel were down there in Egypt. Remember Joseph? Remember Jacob and his family going down there? They were there 430 years, folks. God allowed them to grow. Then He brought them out by the hand of Moses and Aaron. And they were on their way to Canaan's land. The next verse, I'm going to read you the ESV translation because it's going to make you understand it a lot better. I'll read the book first. The book is what? Is it the New King James or is it I'm not sure. As they called them, so they went from them. Here's the way the ESV translates that. The more they were called, the more they went away. God called Israel. He called them His people, and He called them to have a relationship with Him. And God says, the more I called you, the more you went away.
And He did it because He loved them and He wanted them to come back.
That's right. Yes, that's right, Debbie. They sacrificed to the Baals and burned incense to carved images. I taught Ephraim to walk. That's God talking. Ephraim again being the people of Israel. I taught them how to walk. He's using symbolism, right? They're just little babies. I gave birth to them. I'm the one that allowed them to be a nation and a people. I chose them. And I taught them how to walk, taking them by their arms, but they did not know that I healed them. They didn't understand what I was doing. I drew them with gentle cords, with bands of love, and I was to them as those who take the yoke from their neck. Were they under a yoke in Egypt? What were they called when they lived in Egypt? Slaves. They were called slaves when they lived in Egypt because that's who they were. And God says, I'm the one that took the yoke off your neck. I'm the one that took the bond of slavery away from you. I made you my people, my nation. I stooped and fed them. It's a description of God's love and God's care for this people Israel. What He has done for them. The next verse tells of the future. We're going to something else now. He is the people, the land. He shall not return to the land of Egypt, but the Assyrian shall be his king, because they refuse to repent. What's God telling them right there? Your king's going to be an Assyrian, because you're going to be taken captive. You're not going to be your own nation with your own king anymore. There's going to be an Assyrian, and he's going to be your king. The sword shall slash in his cities, devour his districts, and consume them because of their own counsels. My people are bent on backsliding from me. Though they call to the Most High, none all exalt him. There again, let's talk about that idea a minute, because it's something that we can be guilty of too. He says, these people, they call out to God, but there's not anybody who really exalt Him. What does that mean to you? Jim, if I understand you right, they're calling out to the wrong God in the first place. I think, and that is true. And then I think there's something else in it as well. When they did call out to God, what would you say? Yeah, Jody's got it. You're shaking your head.
They called out to him, but they didn't beat him.
Right. They called out to Him, but in their hearts, He wasn't loved or revered or respected as God, because they had another God.
Their actions didn't support what they thought.
That's right.
Just like if you tell somebody you love them, but you mistreat them all the time.
Right. Exactly. So how could we be guilty of something like that? Oh, you ought to hear me pray. Oh, I can pray this real beautiful prayer, and when I get through, all I'm thinking is, boy, wasn't that good? Because I really wasn't thinking about talking to God when I said it. I just wanted it to sound good. I wasn't really expecting God to answer. I wasn't thinking about truly getting an answer for this. I was just trying to impress the people at church. I mean, we can do that, but we could do that in the privacy of our homes too. We could just say a prayer because that's what I'm supposed to do. So I'll think of something and pray it, and then I feel almost like that sometimes when Penny and I sit down to have a meal. I lead a prayer, and we pray and give thanks for the food. And then 2 seconds later, I got a fork in my hand, and I'm starting to eat. And sometimes I think about, now wait a minute, Stan, why did we just pray? Was it really to give thanks, or is that just something we do before we eat? You understand what I'm saying? There's a consciousness, isn't there, that's got to be present with that. There's a reality that's real. where is my mind really? What am I really doing?
Where's your faith?
Yeah.
I'll use this, of course, everybody knows my dear friend, battled with cancer. But I still pray to God in these treatments that she's had. It's not by our worldly definition to give her life.
Right.
It's to extend what she has.
Right.
But when I pray for her, I pray that God heals her completely. I said, if I go give her 2 years, give her 10, where's my faith in God?
Right.
So I told her I will continue to pray that He heals her because my faith, and I just read in Matthew, it said, they told them if you had the faith of a mustard seed,
Right.
you could move a mountain from here to there.
That's a challenging verse, isn't it?
Yes.
And her faith must be pretty weak.
Yeah, you think so, but it's saying if you had that, you could move a mountain. So
Yeah, but who do you know that's ever moved one?
Exactly.
That's right. Which tells me something about the human condition is kind of weak. However, you know, there are people who have done.
God's will, so I always put that in.
Yes.
But I'm not
Right.
going to pray for less
Right.
because my faith would be so weak if I did.
Right. I just think, you know, some of the things that God was most upset with Israel over, don't think for a second that we can't be guilty of it. Now, I doubt if any of you, I hope certainly not, I doubt if any of you have a graven image in your homes that you fall down before and pray to. I really doubt it. I sure hope you don't. That was one of the 10 Commandments, right? And we're not going to do that, but that doesn't necessarily mean we don't have something in our life that is a God to us.
You mean in your television and your
Well,
I don't get that. There are some we know.
right. Well, you know, I'm not, that'd be real hard to define. Where does something, when do we go too far with something? I don't know that line, but I do know that it's possible. I do know that we can live our lives focused on things that are, it's not God. He's not our number one focus.
Temptations are there.
Yes,
They always have
absolutely.
temptations of the evil.
Right.
I think we have to, if we do a little bit of introspection, self-examination, just thinking about it a little bit, I think we would find that there's a whole lot of stuff in our lives that we put before God. And anything that we put before God is a problem. And so we sit here and we listen and we read in Hosea about the children of Israel.
And we understand the problem,
And
don't we?
say, well, I don't do that. I don't do that. I don't have that. I don't have graven images or wooden images in my house.
Right.
But Jody Templeton has other things that she might put before God, that she needs to look at and say, where you going, girl? We just have to be very careful.
Yeah.
Before we
That's,
sit here and think,
Well-
we don't do that. We don't do that.
if this is one of the great challenges of Bible study is doing what with the Word? Applying it to ourselves. And because what good does it do us if we can't apply it? It's always about somebody else. Boy, I'm glad I learned that because I could tell Dodie Harrison about that, and I think he needs it. He needs to hear
No,
that.
you can't. If you're not
Yeah.
applying to yourself, you can't.
That's right. Good. Thank God for teachers that have shared things like that with me and you and all of us and helped us to grow. But if we can't apply it to ourselves, we are missing the main point. Yes. That's what instruction's for. It's for me first. And I'm not going to go. We've covered that good. Thank you for your comments. Let's see. Where did we get to? Verse 8. How can I give you up, O Ephraim? How can I hand you over, O Israel? Oh, and I'm reading out of my Bible. I could read. I don't even know how to pronounce these. How can I make you like Admah? How can I set you like Zeboim? Those last two are unfamiliar. If you read in the book, they were cities that were destroyed along with Sodom and Gomorrah. They were probably small towns that were close by, and they were destroyed when Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. So what is God's language here? How can I give you up? How can I hand you over? And how can I make you like these two cities that I did what to? I rained, what is it? Fire from heaven. Yeah, what was the name of it though? Brimstone? Fire and brimstone from heaven. And I wiped those places off the face of the earth. And it's like, but how can I do that to who? To this people that was my people, that are my people, but have been unfaithful to me. My heart churns within me. My sympathy is stirred. I will not execute the fierceness of my anger. I will not again destroy Ephraim. For I am God and not man, the Holy One in your midst. And I will not come with terror. I struggled with this a little bit, but I think maybe I've come to a better understanding of it. Make no mistake, Israel is, when the Assyrians come and take them away, there will never again be a nation of Israel. They are going to be gone. But that doesn't mean that God came in and killed all the people and wiped everybody out. The people are going to be carried away into captivity, and they will continue to have families and produce children, and will continue on. And not only that, and I don't know the amount or who all this was, but there would be, even in Christ's time, not everybody is from the tribe of Judah and Benjamin. There are people who were faithful to God from the north who came down and lived in Judah who survived. You understand what I'm saying? There's Levites. Aren't there Levites in the first century? Yeah, well, they're from the tribe of Levi. They're not Judah or Benjamin. There are faithful people who continue to live in Judah. But as a whole, the north is no nation anymore. And they're not all wiped off the face of the earth, as God says. Well, in your own words, what did God just say in those verses? How can I wipe you out completely like I have others before? My heart is stirred within me. You're my people, and I'm feeling my compassion and my love and my sympathy towards you. I can't. Had God ever? What Old Testament story what Old Testament story tells us about a time God wiped everybody out, or almost? The story of Noah. What did God do to the earth? They're gone. Right? But God says, I can't do that to Israel. Well, we're going to stop. I hope we got something out of the lesson. Thank you for being here this morning. I think, as far as I know, Jay will be back next Sunday morning.